We didn't make that up. That's in Psalm chapter 30, verse 5. It says, weeping may last for the night, but joy comes in the morning. I believe the psalmist wrote that down because God said, hey, they're going to forget this if you don't write that down. Write that down. And we forget because when we go through hard stuff, that's just what we do. We forget. We forget how good he is. We forget that the sun is even going to come up. We forget that God is still faithful when we go through hard times. But he is faithful. Look, I was 18 years old before I ever heard my father's voice. I was a senior in high school. I was at home by myself one night. I was supposed to be doing my homework. My phone rang, and that's how I met my father. Up until that point, I had never even seen a picture of my father. No, the moment I was born, my 22-year-old mother took me. She took my older brother and she took my sister, and we started over. And as a little boy, I thought my mother had the coolest job in the world because she was a convenience store clerk. That meant candy. But now when your mother is a convenience store clerk and she's a single mother, that also means that your house is going to be really small because that's what she can give you. And that means that your clothes, they're going to be too big for you because somebody else gave you those clothes when they were finished wearing them. It means you're going to see your friends go to things like concerts and games and the dentist, things that you will never be able to do. My mother eventually remarried, but money was always tight in my home. And one of my most significant memories was making a ham and cheese sandwich. I was making a ham and cheese sandwich. I was a middle schooler. My mother walks in the kitchen and she sees me making the sandwich and she just freaks out. And she says, son, what do you think you're doing? I said, I'm just making a ham and cheese sandwich. And she says, son, you can't do that. We are not a ham and cheese family. You have to pick one of those. You have to put the other one back. Son, we are a ham or cheese family. And I'm telling you, under the weight of that, here's what a little boy heard. You are nothing. You come from nothing. You're worth nothing, you have nothing, and you will always be nothing but a ham or a cheese kid. Why do you think your father hasn't called you by now? And when a little boy hears that, he can be crushed. Look, I'm sure in a crowd this size, the majority of us have been through something where we start believing crazy stuff. And when that happens, you better hope you have somebody, because if not, you are in trouble. Somebody that loves you, somebody that believes in you, somebody whose love is bigger than that lie you're hearing. Now, it may only be one person, but that one person could be enough to change your entire story. I know that to be true because my one person was Uncle Jerry. Uncle Jerry was an ordinary man. Didn't make a lot of money, already had 2 children of his own. He wasn't even my blood relative. He was only my uncle through a marriage. But somehow he made time for me. He taught me things that a little boy usually learns from his father. He taught me how to ride a bike. Taught me how to tie a knot. Taught me how to dive in the water without killing myself. He told me he loved me. He said he expected the same thing out of me that he expected from his own 2 sons. He expected me to be a man of character, and he expected me to succeed. And he didn't just say, I love you. No, he showed me that he loved me. Like the time I went out for football. I was the only kid on the football field that had tennis shoes. Everybody else had cleats. I'm sliding around all over the ground. My uncle comes out to watch me play, and he said, well, son, where are your cleats? You can't play football without cleats. I said, Uncle Jerry, I don't have any cleats right now, but I'm going to get some soon. Next thing I know, he's driving me down to Payless Shoe Store. He bought me a brand new pair. He bought me a brand new pair of black, low top football cleats. I had an orange and a white stripe down the side, and I looked so good. So good on that bench. It wasn't funny back then. It was not funny back then.
It's okay, me too.
I remember one time I didn't have money for school supplies. And I looked out the window, and his truck is in my driveway. He calls me out to the truck. I go out, and we sit there for a few minutes, and he talks to me about how important school is. And then he takes his hand, and he put his hand in my hand, and I could feel that he had money folded up in his hand. And he said, son, you're going to take this money. You're going to get what you need for school, and you have to start communicating with me. He said, look at me, son. We are not going to let anything stand in the way of who God has called you to be. And in that moment, I heard a different voice. I heard a voice that said I was fearfully and wonderfully made. I heard a voice that said I was special. I heard a voice that said I was worth the sacrifice. Look, I don't know where I would be without Uncle Jerry. I don't know. I know I wouldn't be here today. I know I love him. I know I love him enough to name my son after him. If you take that one man out of my life, I've got a complete different story. But my wife and I have been married for 21 years. We have 3 incredible children, and get this, we have been blessed to be a part of ministry on almost every continent on planet Earth. We are a ham and cheese family. That's who we are. Look, my uncle gave me so much more than cleats. He gave me so much more than school supplies. He gave me vision. You understand that I will never be able to see a child on a field that doesn't have the money to buy cleats and not go get that child the cleats that they need. He did that. So in 2008, I get this opportunity to begin to travel the world, and I said yes immediately. I was so excited. We started in Nicaragua, Guatemala, the Dominican Republic. I began to travel throughout the world. And while I was there, I was so excited because I'm excited to begin to travel. I didn't even have a passport, didn't know how to get one. I had to look it up. But I looked it up, I figured it out, and as the plane was beginning to land over that first country, I also figured it out that I was in trouble. Because I looked out the window, and when I looked out the window, all I could see all over the ground were these 10 by 10 rusty squares everywhere. And I leaned over and I asked the buddy next to me, I said, hey, what are the squares on the ground down there? He looks and he said, oh, those are shanties. And I said, what are shanties? And the plane lands and we begin to travel through this village, and I learned that shanties are people's homes. Their homes are the size of my bedroom. They're made out of sticks. They're made out of sheet metal. They have no electricity. They have no running water. Entire families are living off of the equivalent of $2 US a day. And I learned something standing in that village. I learned that the deepest poverty is not a lack of food. The deepest poverty is not even a lack of water. The deepest poverty is when you have no hope and you don't know how you're going to get any. And I'm standing in a village full of people with no hope. And our leader comes up to me and he gives me a box of supplies and he says, we want to show you the ministry, the work that we do. But first, can we take this box of supplies down to a family's home that we serve? And we take this box of supplies and we walk for about 20 minutes. We're passing shanty after shanty after shanty until finally we arrive at the end of a village to meet a single mother and 3 children. But she doesn't live in a shanty because she can't yet afford a shanty. Instead, she lives under a black plastic tarp. It's tied to 3 trees. And 2 of these trees hold a hammock. And in this hammock, this single mother and her 2-year-old daughter sleep every night. And on the ground beneath her, in the dirt, is where her 5-year-old and her 8-year-old son sleep every night. She only makes the equivalent of $1 a day, and therefore her family can only eat once a day. And when I asked her what a typical meal was, she says, it's usually tortillas. And as she is telling me this story, I look at her 8-year-old, I look at him in the eyes, and I remember being this age. I remember feeling poorer than most of my friends. I remember wondering where my father was. And I remember that voice that said, you are nothing. And I thought, God, if I wrestled with that lie, what is this little boy wrestling with? And why does he have a twinkle in his eye? Where's his hope coming from? And I learned that it was at his school. But his school wasn't a school at all. It was actually the center that I came to visit. And he was ready to show me his school. So he was excited. He took me by the hand and he led me back up this village. And I knew that we had arrived at the school before we ever got there. Because for the first time since my feet touched the ground, I could hear the sound of children singing. And as we began to walk into this gate, over here are 2 classrooms. These classrooms have desks. They have teachers ready to teach. They had artwork and school supplies and everything that this child needed to have a great day at school. Older children are learning trades like computers and banking and welding, things that are going to actually help them get real jobs and break this cycle that they're in. Over here are 2 bathrooms. Now these bathrooms have sinks with running water and soap and toilets that actually flush. The only 2 toilets in the entire village. Above the bathroom is a massive container of clean drinking water. The smell of chicken and rice is permeating the air, and it was like you could stick your hand out and you could feel hope. But the thing that I will never forget as long as I ever lived was a wooden box nailed to a wall. This teacher goes over. She puts her hand in this box and she pulls out a handful of these letters. And she takes these letters and she starts handing them out to some of these children. And I learned that these letters actually come from each child's sponsor. Each child has a sponsor just like you. That sponsor has chosen this child to be a part of this program. And for $39 a month, that sponsor is providing for that child clean water and education, medical care, dental care, and everything that that child needs to break the cycle of poverty. But they also were providing letters. And these children would go off and they would read their letters and they'd come back smiling from ear to ear. And these letters had stickers in them. So some of these kids were taking these stickers and they were putting them on my pants. And they were putting them on my forehead. And they would put them on my water bottle. And we're just having a sticker party. And I look up and I see a sight I hope I never forget. This little girl came back later than everybody else, and she had her letter pressed up against her chest. She had her eyes closed, and she is dancing with this letter. And she is hugging this letter so tight. It's like she is trying to hug whoever is on the other side of this piece of paper. And she comes up to me, and she hands the letter up to me, and she says something in Spanish. Amy? And I look at this little girl and I said, I don't know what you just said. So she looks at me and she says this louder and faster, like she was sure that would help me out. something in Spanish, Amy. And I'm looking around like, can somebody please help me out? And this translator comes up, he gets down, and he listens to this little girl. And then he looks at me and he says, she wants to know if you know her sponsor. Her sponsor's name is Amy. And Amy's from the United States. And since you're from the United States, she's pretty sure y'all know each other. Man. And I wish I did know Amy, because Amy sounds a lot like my Uncle Jerry. And I knew what that little girl wanted. She wanted to meet somebody that knew her hero. Guys, don't ever underestimate the small things that you do. They're only small to you. To this child, Amy was everything. It was a whole new opportunity at life. I want to introduce you to someone. This little girl's name is Euphrasia. Euphrasia is 4 years old, and she lives in Zambia. Now, I know that you can't see her face, but in just a minute, every person that raises their hand to say, I'll sponsor a child, a specific child is going to come to you. And it will be the exact child that you invest in. You will be the only one sponsoring that child. So you are that child's Amy or Uncle Jerry. Listen, Tauren and I, we are invested in this. I sponsor children, Tauren sponsors children. In fact, tonight, every person in this room that sponsors a child, Tauren makes time after the show to look you in the eyes, shake your hand, say thank you, because he just wants to meet the people that are as invested in the ministry that he believes in. So this is a big deal to us. You sponsor a child monthly. You sponsor for as long as you can. And the child that comes to you is the specific child that you sponsor. Right now I have volunteers that are coming forward. And here's what I'm going to ask you to do. For every person in this room that says, I could sponsor a child, I could be that for one child, I'm just going to ask you to raise your hand. And my volunteers are going to place a child in your hands. I'm going to count to 3, and we're just going to raise our hands. Can we do that right now? Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Just raise your hands as high as you can. Thank you. Keep your hands as high as you can. We have volunteers that are coming all around. If you can come up here, we have people up in front there. Give them a hand. Thank you so much. Keep your hands as high as you can.